the incredible backstory of a billionaire family, one of the American Jewish community's greatest philanthropists, and a modest but powerful rise to success in the real estate world. This week with Avi Schron on Jewish Grit. Welcome to Jewish Grit. Super excited to be in the studio and welcome the host of the studio, Avi Schron. Welcome to Jewish Grit.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And it's a pleasure to have the director of Cammeby's International with us in his studio.
Right. Okay. And thank you for making it so easy for me. All I had to do was come down the elevator, and I was right here.
Tachnasas Archem. It's inviting guests into your studio. So Avi, Hashem has blessed you and your family with success in many different endeavors, real estate and many other things. And we'll talk about that soon. But I want you to look back on your career, on your personal life, and I want you to think of a moment where you needed Jewish grit to climb out.
So what jumps into my head is a personal challenge. When one of my kids was not feeling well and had to be hospitalized for a few days with something that was not major, not minor, but it was somewhat life-changing. He had a type of situation that needed some continuing care. And, you know, you're there in the hospital with a 2.5-year-old kid, and those days, goes back 20 years ago. The hospital was not the most friendly place. And there you are, stuck, a young parent with a child, not knowing what's going to be. I happened to have been in a room where there was some other child patient who, for some reason, was just yelling on top of their lungs, nonstop. And you just like say, what am I doing here? How do I get out of this? What does tomorrow bring? And I remember specifically that typically I would go out to daven with a minyan. I would go to pray with a quorum in a shul, in a synagogue. But over there I couldn't. I had to stay with my child. So I went to the corner to pray, and the only thing that I could do was cry. And tears came out. And I look back at that moment, and you realize that when you connect with God at a moment that you're in trouble and you really feel the connection, I was able to see afterwards such interesting successes with this child, with the rest of the family, because he really wants you to turn to him, and that's why he sends us challenges. God wants us to turn to him and ask him for help. And when you ask him for help sincerely, and the most sincere way of asking somebody for help is when there are tears running down your face, then he answers your prayers. Sometimes immediately, sometimes not, but he's listening. And then you're able to go through with life. And when I came back home, and my other kids wanted to know what happened, what's going to be, I said, listen, God gave us a challenge. It's as if he gave us direct instructions of what our life needs to be from here on in. And we're going to follow those instructions. Sometimes we don't have clarity as what we're supposed to do. Sometimes we do. Sometimes when you have something as clear as that, you know God is giving you instructions. This is what you got to do, day in and day out. Take care of it. I'll take care of you. And that's why we live our life.
Let's talk a little bit about your career. At what point did you enter your family business?
So I entered my family business after I was studying in Kollel for 5 years. Kollel is like a postgraduate school for Talmudic studies, but then after a period of time, it was time to move on and to actually get into the business world. So I joined my father's business after 5 years. At that time, I was living in a place called Lakewood, New Jersey. At that time, it was a relatively small town. I stayed there for 2 years, living as a commuter back to Manhattan, and then I moved to Brooklyn. So
did you go to college?
I did not go to college.
So how does a guy who had zero, professional education walk into a large real estate company in Manhattan and find his bearings?
So that's a very good question, and I think that the way we treat life after studying in yeshiva and studying Talmud, there's so much we don't know, and we have to inquire and be curious about everything in order to be able to absorb and understand the information. We have to challenge the facts on the ground and say, I need to understand this better. That is really the secret to learning anything. If somebody goes to college and they may score very high on their studies because they did well in history and they have a great memory, doesn't necessarily help them, because whatever they learned in history doesn't pertain to to what they're doing in their professional career. And I taught myself accounting, I taught myself computers, I taught myself plumbing, I taught myself electric, I taught myself engineering. And now it's over 35 years later, or close to 35 years later. It seems like, oh, where did you go to school? How did you learn all that information? So I went to the School of Hard Knocks of the University of Life.
Were there moments, like especially in the first year, 2, 3, where you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what's going on?
Of course, and I look back and it happens all the time. Even today, I could get it. We're involved in a special program in New York City to put one of our buildings into a tax exemption. When I started the process, I had no idea what I was doing. I had a friend who was helping me along. Now we're into it. I understand it. I know it. I know what they want. I've read some of the documents, and you learn it, and then you become a professional.
In your 30-year career, or whatever, that you've been involved with your company and your family's business, like, were there moments in the real estate world where like people are like, oh my gosh, what's going to be? Because I know now, especially, with the whole new administration coming in, there's so many people that are panicking. Like you see all these things, move to Florida, et cetera. Like, how do you deal with that?
The way I tell people that I deal with it is that I sit back and I watch God's plan unfold. And I'm going to have a front seat at the most exciting movie that you could ever imagine, because nobody knows what's going to happen. And we're in his hands, and he's in control. We try to do the best we can in order to make the right decisions at the right times and be proactive, because that's what he wants us to do. But on the other hand, the result of that is something we never really know. Most business people never really know what the result of their actions are at the time they're taking that action. I don't really believe that when Steve Jobs started Apple and he came out with a desktop computer, or the fellow who started Facebook in his dorm room for fun, ever imagined that it's going to make him into a multi-billionaire. But sometimes things happen. You never know. So what do we do today when things are changing? You assume that you keep on doing what you're doing, and you sit back and watch the story and be a bystander and enjoy it. Don't stress too much over it. It's very hard to do because stresses are natural. So we try not to stress too much, but it is what it is, and there's not much we can do to change it.
What's it like working with your father?
Many years ago, I think it was in 1999, I traveled on a trip to the former Soviet Union together with a very, very special rabbi whose name was Rabbi Matisyahu Salomon. Rabbi Matisyahu Salomon is what they call a mashgiach in Hebrew. In English, he would call maybe a spiritual advisor to Yeshiva BMG, Beis Medrash Gavoha of Lakewood. And he was somebody who, when you spoke to him, you always walked away with clarity, and people went to him for all sorts of advice, life advice. And he asked me what I do for a living. So I said, I work for my father in a family business. He says, oh, if you would have asked me, I would never have told you to do that.
Huh?
So,
and he was a man with a lot of clarity.
And my response was, you have to get to meet my father. So I think that answers the question. My father is unusual in the real estate business, and there is a tremendous amount of respect, first of all, that he has for us and we have for him, so I'd call that mutual respect.
Is it true that there's a whole backstory of how your father, had success by finding something and returning it? Is that a true story?
So the story is true about finding something and returning it. Whether or not that led to success, that we don't know. So the story is like this. The story is that must have been 1973 or 74, my parents lived in a two-family home, and the family was growing. My father was able to buy a single-family home a few blocks from where he lived. We wanted to go visit this house before we moved in. Now, why did we want to go visit the house? Because the seller was an estate. An estate means that the woman who lived there passed away, and her children were selling the house. She was around 95 when she passed away, and her children were in the 70s. They lived in Florida, and they were not interested in any of the contents in the house. She was a very upscale person. She was a decorator for one of the department stores. So it was a nice house. It was just at that time 25 years old. We didn't want anything from it. They didn't want anything from it. And in the purchase and sale agreement, they wrote that you are taking the house as is with all the contents. There we were. My sister and my brothers were in the house. And my little brother was 6 years old, loved jumping, crawling, climbing. He was crawling under the bed, and he found a paper bag with a lockbox inside of it. And he was very excited. He showed it to me. I was the older brother, so I had to figure out, of course, what was inside of it. I found some tools, broke it open, and inside we found some jewelry and some bonds. My sisters thought the jewelry was really cool, and they wore it home. These big diamonds and bracelets. And they walked in the house, and my mother said, "Where'd you get that from?" They said, "Oh, we found it in the house. We thought it was fun to wear it." Our neighbor in that two-family house was a jeweler, and he took a look at the diamonds and jewelry, and they were quite valuable. It was worth probably around what we paid for the house. So my father didn't know what to do, because on the one hand, everything in the house is ours. On the other hand, it just didn't seem right to keep something that's way over and above what they intended when they sold us the house. They never really had intention for that. So what do? So you go to the biggest rabbi in the Northeast, or in the world at that time. His name was Rabbi Moses Feinstein, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, and he presented this question. So he said he had to think about it for a day or two, and then he came back with a decision that they never intended to include that in the contract of sale. They would have never sold it. They don't sell that. And my father gave it back.
Your family and just the whole business, I think, is the gold standard for honesty. Talk a little bit about what it means. Is that a big part of the company's strategy of when you get deals which are shady or questionable things? How do you deal with it as a family, as an entity?
We run the other way. That's really what we do. And we have found over the years that when we do things as much as we can, upfront, straightforward, a word is a word, a handshake is a handshake, that works for us.
Another thing that your business is on is generosity. Share how that came down from your father, and also I'm curious to hear how you relate that over to the next generation. You have great kids. How do you teach them to be generous? How do you teach them about philanthropy and tzedakah?
Well, the way we teach our kids anything is through example. My father always set an example of being generous. That's what we feel as Jewish people we're supposed to be doing. We're emulating God. One of the things that God did for the world is he's generous to the world. He gives every single day. He's giving to us sunlight, air, food, life, right, in general. And he wants us to emulate him. So he wants us to give to others also. So that's something that, as much as possible we give, and it becomes part of our culture, part of our life, part of who we are. And it's not easy, because sometimes you get a really nice thank you, and then sometimes people are just, not enough. How come you didn't give me that much? How come I want more? Okay, so you know that you have to just know that you did the right thing, and you can't control other people. You do the best you can.
As savvy real estate investors and investors in other things, how do you figure out when it comes to charity where you invest your funds?
It's really about where you personally feel that you want to make a difference. Within our Torah world, we like to support Torah as the highest priority, and that's something that we heard from many great rabbis. There was a great rabbi in Israel. His name was Rav Shach, and I sat with him and my father when I was a teenager. He passed away, probably like 30 years ago already.
He was my rabbi.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And he told us the first place you give to is the people who study Torah, and like we said earlier, and that's because that's the continuity of the Jewish people. The Jewish people need people to study Torah. That's what holds us as a Jewish people. So that's the highest priority. After that, that's anything else. And we give to many. There are so many different good causes to give to.
What makes you most proud of being a Jew?
The culture of looking out for other people. And that is something which falls short when people, don't really feel that they can help other people, right? You can walk down the street and see somebody fall. Sometimes people just walk by and they'll let them lay on the ground. I don't think that would happen if there was a Jewish person nearby. And that's our culture of helping others as much as we can. So it really is, in fact, to quote Mayor Adams, our outgoing mayor of New York City, when I was at one of his fundraisers, he said, "I am so proud of you Jewish people. You have so many nonprofit organizations. You even have nonprofits for your nonprofits," which is true.
It is true.
We do. We have so many nonprofits that they need help also. So we have nonprofits to help them run the nonprofits.
We have an audience of 75 or 80,000 potential people who can watch this in every type and stripe. In Latin America, Australia, hey Australia, and across the entire world. It's people who are starting out their lives, trying to find their spouse, trying to get their first job, trying to make things work for themselves. What's a solid piece of advice that you could tell them from your career, both personal and professional?
Take one day at a time, and when you get stuck, try to figure out how to get unstuck. The world is full of people who just get stuck, and then they say, I don't know how to go on. In our world, at least, when you have good people who you could call, who you could ask a question to, who could advise you, you could get unstuck. Sometimes you could just be stuck in your mind, even if you're not stuck physically.
So true.
And sometimes you just need somebody to tell you, no, you're not stuck. You could do it. Try. People who get stuck and they are not willing to continue, and they want to just stop and say, I'm stuck. That's it. The road, the gate went down at the beginning of the road, and that's it. I can't go anymore. There are plenty of people like that. And then there are those people who say, well, I happened to notice the gate went down, but 10 feet down the road, there's a hole in the gate I could climb through and get to the other side. So you just didn't look. You're sitting there with your blindfolds on, looking at the gate going down, and you say, I have to get across. I can't get across. Go down the road. Turn your head to the right. Turn your head to the left. Or ask the local guy who knows his way around and say, how can I get across? And I'll get you across. There's so many ways to get unstuck. And I think, looking back at my father's career in real estate, I think that was one of the things that made him success, that he's always thinking about how to get unstuck. How do I solve the problem? What is the problem? What is the solution? And sometimes you have to drill down to really identify the problem, because sometimes, again, the problem could be in your mind and not a real problem. Or sometimes once you drill down and say, okay, how do I get from point A to point B? And the problem is, your car broke down, so you're going to say, "Okay, I'm stuck." Or the solution is, I just have to get to point B, or why do I have to get to point B?
Right.
Maybe I have to go somewhere else,
Good point.
and I could just walk there, right? So
Fantastic. It was a real pleasure and a joy. This
Okay.
is a great vibe.
Great.
I think there was a lot of amazing insight, and we're grateful for the studio, and we're grateful for the amazing things you do for the Jewish people, and for the time that you shared with us.
Okay.
Continue
You're welcome.
Hatzlacha and success.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Jewish Grit, an Olami mentorship podcast. At Olami Mentorship, we believe that everyone needs a mentor. What better way is there to tap into your personal and professional potential than with a Jewish mentor at your side? Learn more at olami.org/mentorship. Don't forget to keep listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.